With sugar white beaches as far as the eye can see and history dating back to the 16th century, this city was America's first settlement. And we'll see why her downtown main thoroughfare was named one of 10 great streets in the US on this episode of Ms. World Traveler in Pensacola, Florida. Hi friends, I'm Ms. World Traveler Kerry Damiano, inviting you on an adventure to discover style, design, fashion, art, and antiques in great shopping destinations across the country and around the world. Come with me. When Spanish conquistador Don Tristan de Luna washed ashore, along with 1,500 other colonists, in August of 1559, Pensacola was dubbed America's first settlement, which is now marked by a 3-mile trail with over 20 stops and 70 points of interest throughout the downtown historic district. But the attempt to settle failed after just 2 years, and since then, Pensacola has changed ownership several times, earning its nickname City of Five Flags. Spanish, French, British, Confederate, and American flags have at one time or another all flown over the town, making it a true melting pot of cultural heritage. Often called the cradle of naval aviation, Pensacola's Naval Air Station is both an active military installation and home to the Blue Angels, a demonstration squadron showcasing the elite skills of the United States Navy and the Marine Corps. In 1946, the Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Chester Nimitz, had a vision to create a flight exhibition team whose mission would be to inspire a culture of excellence and service to country through precision aerobatic maneuvers and community engagement. We happened to just miss their homecoming show, which was the weekend before we arrived, but residents in Pensacola often get to see them practicing during the show season. But even if you don't get to see the Blue Angels while you are here, the Naval Aviation Museum is an incredible treasure trove of military history, including more than 150 restored aircrafts. Free tours, offered by retired pilots, begin as you walk onto a replica of the aircraft carrier Nimitz. To tell us more about the 350,000 square foot facility and relay some of the backstories that bring the exhibits to life, we went to Dina Linn, the museum curator. So Dina, we are so excited to be here at the National Naval Aviation Museum.
Yes, ma'am.
Did I get that right?
You most certainly did,
Okay.
and we are very happy to welcome you here. Our museum is one of 10 official U.S. Navy museums throughout the country. We are under the Naval History and Heritage Command out of Washington, D.C., and our mission is to preserve, collect, tell the stories of U.S. Navy personnel and their families. Our mission at this particular museum is to tell the story of U.S. Naval Aviation. We're here on the quarterdeck of our museum, and this is really the first spot where a visitor will come, get that full impact of our mission. You get a sense of reverence here at the museum based off of the statue that's behind us. And so it's the spirit of naval aviation. It depicts 5 naval aviators from different eras in naval aviation history, and it was sculpted by our former director, Captain Bob Rasmussen, who himself was a Blue Angel. We have the early era of U.S. naval aviation, World War I. Then it proceeds to World War II era. We have the Korean War and Vietnam, Gulf War, and more modern day to the end. So as we know, history is always in progress. We're always making history every day. We're actively collecting artifacts throughout our business here at the museum and our mission. And so we hopefully one day will expand on even this timeline that you see.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you guys are doing a great job, because when you walk in, you almost want to be quiet. Mm-hmm. Because there's something about it being very reverent and quite impressive as you walk through that front door and see this and see the gentleman there, and you know, it's just like,
yes, ma'am.
Yes. We need to respect this.
So we are standing on one of the museum's newest exhibits that is supposed to mimic an aircraft carrier deck. That's what we're standing on right now. So what makes naval aviation so special and so different from any other military service that operates aircraft is that the Navy essentially runs floating airports. And that is what makes U.S. military might and reach so vast, because we have that ability to send our men and women across oceans, literally on what amounts to a floating airport, floating cities. So aircraft carriers have their own zip code, essentially, their own mail rooms. You're operating what amounts to this giant airport on a very small footprint, relatively speaking, in the middle of the ocean. So that's really where American military power comes into play, and also humanitarian efforts. Aircraft carriers can be deployed at any moment to help our allies around the world. So we're standing on the Nimitz deck. This is, again, like I said, an immersive experience at the museum, where you can stand here in person and sort of feel what it's like to see an aircraft come, land on an aircraft carrier, and then take off again. So we'll just walk down so you can experience the whole thing.
Okay.
So we purposefully designed the museum so that visitors will come on board a modern aircraft carrier, and then you sort of step into the past. And we have some aircraft models here, aircraft carrier models, that show the Navy's first aircraft carrier, which was the USS Langley CV-1. And so this graphic gives you a rundown of the size of that first carrier, and then also the size of the Bush carrier that was one of the more modern carriers made, a nuclear carrier, nuclear operated carrier, the cost, the dimensions, and then side by side you can see just how tiny the first carrier was as compared to modern day carriers. For those not familiar with naval aviation, when an aircraft lands on the deck, it has to hook, it has to catch on a wire in order to slow the aircraft down, or else you would
just keep on going.
Correct. In the olden days, they didn't have a wire. They had hemp that was tied into very strong rope, and that's what they would hook on. And I just think of that as being incredible. Also, their communications on the early carrier, they would use carrier pigeons. That was an actual thing, yes.
That's like pun intended, right?
Yeah, right, carrier pigeons. And today, obviously, they use our technology, satellites, that kind of thing. But yeah, carrier pigeons are quite effective from what I understand.
Sure. Carrier pigeons on an aircraft carrier.
We love that. So like most history museums, the museum is set up in a timeline fashion where we try to give people some frame of reference for where we've been, where we're going. So behind us is our World War I diorama when naval aviation first got started in 1914. And it just shows an early naval air station. And it's one of our most popular exhibits, probably because there's real sand in the diorama. We do not recommend that people touch it, but it is one of the highlights.
Great. Well, we hope we don't have kids walking up and touching the barbed wire.
So top secret, another top secret exhibit tip. This is actually rubber.
I can feel that it is, yeah.
People won't be harmed when they touch it, but it is a good deterrent for the sand. All right, my favorite aircraft at the museum is the NC-4 flying boat. And she's actually not part of the museum's permanent collection. She's on loan from the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum. She's been here for many, many years. We're very grateful to that institution for letting us be the caretakers of this amazing artifact. But essentially, in 1919, this aircraft made the first transatlantic flight. It wasn't nonstop, but it was the first time that it had been accomplished. And it was a huge deal worldwide. Ticker tape parades, Everywhere they ended up stopping, they received, the crew members received gifts and accolades from foreign dignitaries. And it's just an amazing feat of engineering when you really think about 50 years later, a naval aviator was the first man to walk on the moon, Neil Armstrong. So how far the world came, the United States came, as far as technology goes, from 1919 to 1969, it was a huge leap.
Wow.
Naval aviation was right at the forefront of it.
Well, and it's also quite massive. And you know, when you see it on the old films, it doesn't look nearly that big, right? It almost looks like it's piddly.
Sure,
but when you're standing underneath it, this is a big.
It's very impressive.
It's very impressive.
The Titanic, you know, to people at the time, the Titanic looked immense. When you see images of the Titanic next to modern cruise ships, it looks very tiny.
Right.
But in the context of the time period, this was a marvel. It's still humbling to look at this aircraft and to think of this achievement. This is another one of my favorite micro artifacts in the collection. It is the Killer Cooler.
Well, I like the name.
The nickname, right? But it's literally a cooler, an ice box. But it dates to the World War II era. It was manufactured by the Kelvinator Company. During the war, like many other manufacturers, they stopped making their usual product, which was refrigerators, and they started making aircraft parts. So to obtain a cooler of this size was quite rare. They were very expensive. The crew, though, on board Saratoga was able to obtain one, and they used it as their form of trench art in the ready room. So you'll notice it has all their bombing missions on there, the number of aircraft that they downed, number of ships that were sunk, has their battle record written on it, and all of the duty stations and cities where the cooler ended up. So on one side it has the officers, on the other side it has enlisted. It also has an asterisk next to the individuals who were killed in action. So it's an impressive battle record and quite unique.
How did you get a hold of it?
Oh, that's a super
long
story.
It's a really long story, okay.
Essentially, but it's interesting too because they said that she earned the Purple Heart because there's a piece of shrapnel embedded in the side of the cooler if you walk around to the side, just because she was wounded in battle. So fascinating piece of history.
Wonderful.
Another favorite, I know I have so many favorites in our museum.
It's okay, you're allowed.
The Home Front USA exhibit is actually everybody's favorite. What we've realized from multiple visitors, multiple generations, this exhibit has been here since the 1990s. It was the brainchild of our former deputy director, Mr. Buddy Macon. And what you'll see when you go through is first a theater, the Sanger Theater as it would have been in Pensacola during the 1940s. You have the sailor buying a movie ticket, you have the jukebox playing in the lobby. Movie theaters at the time, you would show a lot of newsreels. That's how people would get their news about what was happening with the war. Movies are really, really cheap. They were like a nickel to go see a movie. And from there, you're going to progress into downtown Pensacola, Palafox Street, as it would have looked in 1943. So there's a house, a little home. You can experience what life would have been like for people on the home front. There's also a restaurant there. There's a pawn shop. There's a drugstore and a little grocery store too. So people really find it to be a nostalgic, immersive experience. A lot of people, have heard stories from their grandparents or great-grandparents about what life was like on the home front. There was rationing, victory gardens, all of that we've tried to convey in this space. And so we hope you enjoy it.
Because it is located on an active military base, you will need to enter at the West Gate, show your ID, and go through a simple security check. But it doesn't take long, and then you are ready to be wowed.
Well, I, for one, found that fascinating. And we've got more fascinating things to show you from Pensacola. In the next segment of Ms. World Traveler, we're headed to the whitest sand beaches you've ever seen. You won't want to miss it.